We also know that our kids love going away, so we might go to the beach or whatever else, but not because we're punishing them, we're not taking them, but it might be able to say, right now, I do not feel safe putting you in a moving vehicle to go to this particular location. So this is by no means punishment, but definitely your safety and my safety is more important than going to the beach or wherever it is that we were going to be going. But we do have many people, including neighbours and sometimes schools, say, we're really, and excuse my language, we're really pissed off. Because this child was suspended last week, but we found out that you had a really great picnic over the weekend. Why are you rewarding bad behaviour? And I suppose what we're trying to say is, in the absence of us having a relationship with these kids, then how on earth are these things that we're trying to do have any meaning for them? Sorry?
Also, the response back to me, so let's help me understand how you led to suspension in the first place.
Precisely right. Definitely.
So we need to
yeah.
be on the same page. Yeah.
Definitely.
Have you done any work with the JDAI program out of any Casey Juvenile Detention Initiatives Alternatives? Have you done any research, or are you talking with them at all?
No.
On their,
So what's the name of it, sorry?
JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, with the Annie Casey Foundation. Just go to the website.
Yeah, look, that sounds very interesting. Because like I said, this still is in the process of becoming mainstream. So anything that we're able to kind of bring back, to be able to support and enrich, this is the time. And I think that these are the forums that allow for that.
Well, if I could just jump in and just add to there was a question that I heard it as how do you engage law enforcement, and how do you sell this, or how do you communicate this in a way that makes sense? And just anecdotally, one of the things that our organization has been working on has been providing trauma-informed training to beyond human service providers, but into law enforcement, juvenile justice, and we've actually worked very closely and trained every single uniformed officer in the city of Albany. Has 3 hours of our trauma-informed care ACES curriculum in the context of community policing and working with adolescents in particular. And having done that, I can tell you that I was prepared for a bit of pushback from police officers. They were actually the most engaged, most interested, and most motivated crowd that I stood in front of, including DSS, public educators, and mental health providers. They are finding themselves first responders from mental health crisis to family crisis, are beginning to understand that their interventions matter. They're also under a ton of pressure to watch their use of force. So you can communicate, if you can learn to speak the language of law enforcement, there is a perfect opportunity to partner up. And right now there is a very, right now is a very good time to be having those conversations with leaders in law enforcement. And we've had good success with that. And so from a slightly different angle, our community is kind of working on some similar protocols, nowhere near as formalized or top down. They tended to be more grassroots and community driven. But so we're getting to a different space from via a different path, and I can tell you that law enforcement has been among the most interested in participating in the conversation, which has been both heartening and a little sad, I guess. Yeah.
And here in Boston, there's a NGO, Strategies for Youth, which is doing exactly that piece of work. So they're doing it locally and nationally as well. And they have a framework that they're using around that. And
so what's it called, sorry?
It's called Strategies for Youth.
Strategies for Youth, excellent. So the training that also it was mandated was provided by FACS and the Lighthouse Institute. So they're based in Melbourne, and essentially what it was, every agency and member of police from different police stations in the region had to attend this training, which covered attachment, object relations theory, brain, neuroscience, and so forth, just to be able to first understand the behaviour, so we can start having discussions and moving away from challenging and manipulative and dangerous to let's really understand what's going on, what is the behaviour beginning to communicate, and therefore staff in residential care settings were beginning to then use the same language as police and vice versa, which became really important to then share that common language. And therefore when they're also then reading these behaviour support plans, which are the same ones that we've got, the language, again, it's become uniform, which is really important. So the role of police really is about they're coming in when there are safety implications. This environment has become so unsafe that your role is to be able to support us, to be able to contain this environment and bring it back to safety. That's what it's about. As I said earlier, there are limitations to this protocol, which are for serious assaults and anything in serious crime, this will not protect you. And I think that was the negotiation between how do we support and when is it so serious that the strategies and the behaviour support plan actually aren't apt to be able to cover what has just happened. And when we're doing all of those things, when we're actually saying, okay, arrest is an option but can be the last resort, and we're able to then keep kids in our programs, it gives us more of an opportunity to be able to develop those key relationships that we know are the key subject for change. There is nothing more important than attachment relationships for brain development. If we're in a position to provide a concept of home, so this is not just a house where you live, but this is your home. There's a sense of belonging. There are photos of you. Your family, when safe, are able to come and pick you up for contact and so forth. When you need food, when you need water, when you need all those basic your physiological needs, if you consider Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're able to provide that. But if you are in detention and we're beginning to develop a strong relationship, or even a relationship at that point, it disrupts that. So we need to be able to move away from anything that's going to disrupt what we know works best, which is relationships. The opportunity for people, for opportunities for relationships, for support, for an environment that is consistent, routine, predictable. In order to have any impact on the legacies of trauma, we need to be the opposite of trauma. And that's really important. So when kids are going to juvenile detention, mind you, engaging in some fantastic programs while they're in there. Fantastic programs. Quite impressive, in fact. But it does mean that it's still going to be a short to medium term stay, but if they've got long-term orders and they're going to be up with us for a long time, this has become the environment by which we can build. And we can get a sense of who you are and what you need, and when you feel safe enough to be able to express that, we're in a position to be able to provide that. It is very much around family contact and how do we advocate for you to be able to have more contact with family in a manner that is safe. Because we know that regardless of the abuse, many kids still want to have contact with family because they love their families. And their families very often love them back very, very much. So because they were unsafe doesn't mean that the presence of love was never there. So how do we do this in a manner that is safe? We also understand that many of our kids, when they're turning 16 or even 18, they're going back to family regardless. So how do we actually begin to kind of create a bit of a model around that is going to be safe for them? Many of our kids engage in equine therapy, sand play therapy and so forth. Really kind of significant stuff. But again, they might be developing a really kind of great therapeutic alliance with their counsellor, and then that's disrupted, and then it's got to start all over again. So these are the things that we're trying to avoid, and these are the things that we try to argue as to why this was required. And even when kids are at a point where they're in front of a magistrate, we might be able to send recommendations to be able to say, if they go into juvenile detention, these are the things that they're going to be missing out on. Give us an opportunity to do what we need to do. But also expect that this behaviour is not going to turn off from now till tomorrow. We need to know that this is not going to change immediately. But give us an opportunity to put all of these things in place. Give us the opportunity to build capacity. Give us an opportunity to have our kids educated. And education doesn't always have to be formal. It can be about how do we teach you how to learn and fall in love with learning. How do we plan for a future that is meaningful to you? And while all of these discussions were going on because they were plentiful, then we were also looking at brain research and thinking the adult brain and the teen brain works differently. The teen brain doesn't actually stop developing until age 25. So the capacity to be able to assess and make judgments doesn't actually fully develop until that age. So when we're talking about 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and you couple that with the impact of trauma, then really they're not positioned to succeed. And what we need to be able to do is, how do we position these kids to succeed in a manner that is safe? So who did we have? We had Family and Community Services, which is our child protective services. New South Wales Police, Association of Children's Welfare Agencies, which basically is like, it's a peak body that represents the needs of agencies providing out-of-home care, including residential care. Aboriginal Child, Family and Community Services, ABSEC, New South Wales Ombudsman, the Office of the Children's Guardian, Legal Aid. So all the key players that are in a position to have influence are in a position to say, yeah, we want this, we need this, we support this. Getting all of them in the same room and actually writing up agreements. And then now that once that is written up and is being rolled out, we are all of us are accountable to the same protocol. That's the main difference. We're not saying Impact is doing this, but you guys are doing that. We are all accountable to the same protocol, which is important. And we have had visits from the Office of the Children's Guardian, so we have community visitors that come to do spot checks on our programs to see how things are going. And when they have a look to see that a critical incident led to a child being arrested, the question that will come back from their report is, why wasn't joint protocol exercised? And then we might be able to say, no, it 100% was, but what occurred fell outside of the scope. But then now we're accountable to them. We're accountable to all these parties and they're accountable to us because we're all accountable to the same protocol. That's important, that's where the power is.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's part of, as Hugo's saying, it's evolving and various programs and various kids are engaged in the protocol at different parts of the journey. But it's having all of these organisations have got to go through that process, and what we're going through is understanding what their role and responsibility is within the protocol. And you'll see that education's not actually on that list, which does my head in. It's just should be up here somewhere. But we invite education into that meeting because with an informed profile of the kid from there, we can then start to look at alternative ways of addressing and delivering education for kids. And that's the important part. If we can engage them in that safe learning space, then the need for this stakeholder engagement is going to reduce. We're going to end up with a less restrictive environment for that child to be able to engage and learn. We see in education, having been on that side, our school terms run for 10 weeks. Statistically, week 8 is grade week for suspension for schools for our kids because it gives them the last 2 weeks off school plus the school holidays and the next 2 weeks going into the next term. So this protocol helps to inform schools against their suspension rates. So they actually understand what the implications are for that young person, the family and the community if they suspend them for a long suspension, 20 days. So it's going back into schools and holding them accountable for their decision is also going to impact on the greater community. So there's ways that we can use this protocol to inform better practice with each other as well, not just advocate for the young person, which is the core business, but it's informing better practice and more accountability and responsibility for yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I may have missed this. What triggers the protocol? Is it a
Sorry?
What triggers the protocol?
Yeah, the question.
How does the protocol start for an individual kid? Is
Oh,
it
okay,
like,
sure.
Who's
Yeah,
response?
how do I
Like
get
what?
there?
Yeah, so it can happen in a number of ways. Unfortunately, the way that it tends to happen is that a young person starts getting in trouble and then police are coming to your door and then you start having discussions about what can we do. What should be happening, and to be more proactive, is you have a referral, you know that a child and young person has certain behaviours that are now habitual. You know that they're going to be coming into contact with either the local police or the area in which they're hanging out. And a proactive approach would be just letting you know this is who they are, this is what they're doing. We want to be able to make you aware because we want to exercise the principles of joint protocol. And you will still have people ask, what is that again? I've heard of it, but I'm not too sure because it's still quite early on. I mean, it was signed off in August 2016, but it's still in the process of being rolled out. But that's a proactive approach. So as we've discussed, the objective is to reduce the frequency of police involvement in responding to behaviour for young people living in residential out-of-home care services. Promote the principle that criminal charges will not be pursued against a young person where alternate and appropriate, and I think that's important for us to talk about appropriate. There have to be appropriate options. It's not just going to be, you know what, you've been through a hard time, so we're going to let that one go. There has to be something in there, so they're able to make a connection between this was the behaviour, this was the impact. How do we begin to develop that sense of attunement? And how is that behaviour going to get in the way of what my goals could be? Now mind you, the goals don't have to be huge. It could be, and for our kids, I can't wait till I'm 16 so I can get my licence. I want to have that car. And then an astute youth worker will look at that and say, love that. We won't worry about talking about the criminal behaviour for now. Let's really talk about the car that you want. How much does it cost? Where are you going to get it? How much do you need to save per week to be able to get that car? And once that car is almost tangible, I've had a thought. If you're incarcerated, if you're in juvenile detention, if you are deemed to be unsafe, you're really going to struggle to get your license. How do you marry these two ideas together of what you want versus what you're doing? That's where the real work happens. Facilitating collaboration between police and residential services, absolute key. That's been the absolute key. We have so much more contact now with our local police stations. And I think that you can think to yourself, ooh, they know us too well, they know us by name. And you can have a bit of a chuckle around it. But in actual fact, it means that what we're doing and the strengthening of relationships is working. If you were to ask us how well is this working, I think that we're probably 60% there, because there's still so much room for improvement. There are times that we will get a community visitor report saying, why weren't the principles of the joint protocol exercised? And then I'll say, that's a really good question. And then looking at who was on shift, it may have been a new staff member or whatever else. Yep, oops, I didn't do that. And now it's too late because they've already kind of started that path. But anything that first starts off needs a period to be able to change, and that change management, and to be able to let the dust settle, and begin to look at what are the inner practices within our organisation that could be better refined, so that we're actually meeting the needs of this protocol and vice versa. And also it's about information exchange with police. So one of the things that has worked really well is that police will contact our service to say, I've seen this young person at Blacktown at the mall, and we know what tends to happen on a Thursday night at the mall, just letting you know that this is likely to happen. Fantastic, we were looking for them, couldn't find them, we're able to now go in and prevent what could have been. Same token, we might give them a call to say, just letting you know, they've just absconded. This is where we're thinking they're going, not too sure, they were picked up by this car with this number plate. Just be on the lookout. So even before things happen, we're able to kind of have that relationship. That's important. So the guiding principles, it's a protocol, it's a policy, it's a procedure, and the actions need to be in proportion with the behaviour. So if something really significant has happened, something really serious, where the effects on another human being were really severe, if it doesn't actually meet the threshold for us to kind of go down the criminal path, then there needs to be something in place that really kind of warrants, wow, that was huge. And we're going to be talking about it, and we're going to be safeguarding against it, and you're going to have a part to play in that, because we expect that you're going to do the very best that you can. There's an expectation. It doesn't mean that they're going to get there, but we work with that. That's why we're there. Understanding that at times what would normally happen in a home in the community wouldn't warrant a parent contacting the police. So if they've got that sense of trust in themselves to be able to manage that, what do we need to put in our staff so they can trust that, you know what, I can manage this. It's hard, it's going to be one of those nights. Maybe I'm not going to even get to finish dinner tonight, but there's something really huge going on and we've got this. A trauma-informed approach recognises the presence of trauma symptoms. So we're talking about trauma symptoms, we're no longer talking about challenging behaviour. Because challenging behaviour is sometimes there and perceived that it's challenging there to challenge me. It's actually not even about me at all. There's something much bigger, greater happening. It's about protecting kids from entering the juvenile justice system, but it's also about protecting the victims of what has happened. It's about that debrief. It's about, are you okay? Are you feeling safe? What needs to happen right now for you to feel safer? Is there anything that we've learned from this incident to ensure it doesn't happen again? Immediate safety will always and needs to override the protocol. And serious incidents fall, like I said, outside the scope. So the process, getting all
Hugo?
these people together.
Sorry, we had a question
Oh,
there.
sorry.
Who defines whether or not it's a serious incident?
So within the protocol, it starts talking about, it gives you certain, you will never have a definition for each, and that's where you come across complications. And that's where internally you need to be able to have a collective understanding of what are the type of behaviours that we are not equipped to be able to manage. And so, for example, a sexual assault, so really kind of talking about that stuff. There is nothing within what we're doing right now that can say, you know what, we're going to manage this, we're not going to contact police. There is no way that would happen. A young person who's been physically assaulted to the point that they're severely injured. No. That actually, you've taken all ability for us to be able to advocate and protect, that action has certain consequences, but what we will do is, while you go through the system, we will be there every step of the way, because it's a scary system. And you're going to have people come talk to you that you've never met before. They're your lawyers. You're going to meet them on the day. They're going to ask you all these kind of questions in a bit of a rush, but we're going to be there because they're going to ask you things and use language that you may not understand. So training, as I mentioned, really important. The rollout, we're in the midst of it now. Family and Community Services, as the governing body that holds parental responsibility, they're the ones that are coming in and saying, we need to be able to have these meetings. We need to ensure that each of our kids who is subject and could benefit from the protocol should be on the protocol. If not, you'll be getting a phone call from our caseworker. In fact, you will get one to say, why wasn't the protocol followed? What on earth got in the way? And we might be able to excuse it once or twice, but by the third time, there is something inherently going on within your agency that is not actually maximising the benefit of a lot of hard work that we need to do. Residential out-of-home care providers need to be able to take the time to teach staff about what is the protocol and why is it in place, something very similar to what we've done today. And certainly police, safety, not punitive, safety. Governance, we have statewide steering committees, and essentially for that, getting all those people together to talk about how's this going? Where are the complications? Where are we falling short? Where are the regions that actually aren't exercising it too well? Are we still getting a whole bunch of phone calls about a young person kicked a letterbox on their way to school and police was called? Are we having too many of those incidents? And if yes, do we need a refresher training? So basically it's around what is the integrity of this protocol and is the integrity being followed?
I think that the really important piece of this steering committee is it forces policy change internally. When these steering committees coming together, police have got to look at the way that they're dealing with children's guardian. Is there a policy alignment? Has there been a miss? And that is the shift. That is the change that I get quite excited about, because it is forcing a change for the end user, being the child. So you've got to get that policy shift going and having those high level discussions with these guys in the room. Not that we're privy to that, but the lead agencies here. That's where we're going to start to see that new style of policing, that new community involvement, less restrictive practices happening in our communities. As Dave was saying, with the community work that he's doing with his teams, these are the guys that have got to make that policy shift. That then, someone asked about funding before, it's then that shared funding source for the community to make it happen. So it's, we're implementing the protocol, but what we've really got to do is feed that information back up so these guys are empowered and make the change that we need at that policy level. The other day, I think it was Kevin Campbell was talking about our former Minister Brad Hazzard, the policy shift there. He dropped a lot of policy change and then moved portfolios. Thanks very much. That's just the way the government sort of works. But the policy stands, doesn't it? So that's what looking at that sort of stuff there. That steering committee, policy change.
So we've got, in the interest of time, I'll talk about one case study. So we have, say, Jane, incredibly bright girl. And I think that sometimes that's used in a really complimentary way, and so it should. But this girl was actually reading at the age of 3 and almost self-taught. Incredibly sharp, witty, and she will hold you to account. I've been in meetings where she's been part of how can you help us support you through this protocol. So I've been there, I've seen it all happen. But then, in preparation for this presentation, I had one of our staff have a chat to her. Sorry, Adam organised for that, to get her voice and talk about, well, what's your experience of it? And the questions that she was asked was, can you tell me what's your understanding of the joint protocol? Don't know, never heard of it. How were you introduced to joint protocol? The police and committing offences, going missing and being in resi care. Do you attend the meetings? Do you have choice? I don't think I've been to one, but I'd go. So I've been in situations where she's been in those meetings. I don't want to come across as if I'm questioning her, because I think there's something very legitimate about her response. Do you receive feedback from the meetings? From whom? No. Are you confident that your voice is being heard at these joint protocol meetings? No. I've made complaints about things to impact and nothing ever happens. Has the joint protocol been a positive experience for you? Nothing has happened when I've complained. no action has ever been taken when I speak up. Any suggestions from you about the joint protocol? Don't do the bare minimum. Listen to us when something's wrong. Try to fix it, and don't just do a little bit. Just try to do a lot. Any other comments? It's hard to comment when I don't know what it's about. I found that incredibly interesting because apart from being incredibly intellectually advanced and me knowing that she's been in those meetings, one of the thoughts that I had when it was taking place was this really important discussion that's going to have massive implications in your life is being held in a building that was built and designed by adults for adults. There is nothing child-friendly or teen-friendly about this environment. And me walking in, I almost have to feel like, okay, there's my shirt tucked in. So if I'm feeling that as an adult, how can a child kind of go in and feel safe thinking, this is my space, this is my meeting, this is for me? So I think that if I had to take a guess, and it's just a guess, intellectually she may understand it, but what meaning did she get from that discussion or a whole range of discussions? My guess would be not much, and that would be the evidence. So for me, I think that learning from mistakes, I'll start with environment. In the environment in which discussions take place, any discussion is so incredibly important. I don't think she would have been asked, if police are going to come and have a chat to you because they want to know how we can do things better, how we can help you, and your caseworker will be there. Where do you want to have that meeting? I don't think that's ever been asked. And I would like to start asking that question. I would like to be able to make a link between understanding and meaning. I would find that a really significant progression of what New South Wales has started. Staff training is really important, but as I mentioned, you can't have a one-off training because you walk out of that training thinking this is fantastic, but a month later, life got in the way and you are back to believing what you used to believe because that is your dominant story, that is your dominant thought, that is what you've believed for a very long time. So then how do you thicken this story to actually compete with what you used to know and actually make it a dominant? Kids are unaware of their involvement in the protocol. They're either unaware or it doesn't mean anything to them. That needs to change because it's about them. And an overarching policy for agencies to localise and implement. So essentially it's about really thickening that sense of it requires partnerships and interagency work. Any questions, any comments? I know that we've covered a hell of a lot, but is there anything that you want to be able to query? Yeah.
So I'm transparency, I'm overwhelmed, but I have so many questions to ask you. First of all, I could listen to you talk all day long. You could say the alphabet all day long, and I would sit here and listen.
Thank you so much.
A couple of questions. So I work in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts we have separate state agencies for a lot of things, including juvenile justice.
Yeah.
We have our own mental health authority, so we have state agencies that solely work around mental health. We have the child welfare. So we have all these state agencies at times working collaboratively together, sometimes not working collaboratively together, but yet they're all the same kids.
Yes.
And so a couple just sort of contextual questions. Did this joint protocol come by way of data that yielded, unfortunately, a significant number of children are coming out of home, and you might have answered this and I might have missed it, because I'm getting a sense that this joint protocol is a result of so much data that has been, unfortunately, leading the path to kiddos in our programs are unfortunately getting funneled into juvenile justice by way of practices, lack of understanding, blah, 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 blah. So that's helpful. And then, so in Massachusetts also, you can enter our congregate care system in several different ways. Those 3 state agency ways, but you can also enter through the school systems. Schools can actually make decisions with the parents and go to residential. And those residentials are all kit and caboodle. So the school sending kiddos to residentials that our child welfare is sending, our mental health authority is sending, and even juvenile justice is sending. So can kiddos enter your system? Can kiddos enter your system by way of a school system or through a voluntary agreement between the caregiver and a state authority and saying, we haven't neglected our child per se, we haven't abused our child per se, but due to significant issues, behavioral, mental health